What's going on, guys? Smash Adams here, and today I'm going to do an updated deck profile on the long-awaited Chaos Dragonsworns. Yep, Chaos Dragonsworns. You know, the Chaos Dragon deck with the Twilight variant. Yeah, this is by far one of my favorite engines to run with Chaos Dragons, and with the high amount of changes that I've made to the deck, it was for the better, and the deck is still phenomenal to this day, even though I haven't touched it in a while. But considering that the flexibility that it gives, as well as speed, just to get those OTKs on board, considering that it's now a lot easier to summon JD and all, I figured, you know what, I just go ahead and give it a try, especially for the March 2016 format. It's rarely seen play, even in this format, as far as Chaos Dragons go, especially of this engine in particular. But nonetheless, I like where it is. It's still flexible, it is still competitive, and like any standard Chaos Dragon deck, if you were to run certain tech choices here and there in the engine, it's viable still, no matter what you run. I mean, depending on what you have, you can't really go wrong with Chaos Dragons, even if you run more Lightsworns. So, I'm going to show you all the deck, explain a couple of my tech choices, and without further ado, here is Chaos Dragonsworns. Start off, of course, we've got the triple Lightpulsar Dragon, self-explanatory. You need these to get your plays off with Red Eyes and JD and go straight for the OTK. This is the guy to go for, especially as a playset. Usually the more you see this, especially in the hand with a Lightsworn, the higher the chances are you're going to be summoning this and doing some shenanigans later on in the duel. But nonetheless, Lightpulsar is by far one of the most highly rated dragons to run in any given deck overall, if not Lightsworns. Next we've got triple Darkflare Dragon. I was contemplating on cutting one out, but I figured running them in spades, considering Red Eyes is still limited, you need to have a secondary target for Lightpulsar's ability to summon a dragon in its place. Because there are some cards that can stifle Chaos Dragons still, no matter what engine you run. But to be on the safe side rather, sorry about that, yeah, Darkflare is never a gimmick in Chaos Dragons, or Lightsworns in particular. But the fact that it can also just get rid of unnecessary cards in your opponent's graveyard and just banish the heck out of them, yeah, like I said, highly underrated. But in my opinion, one of the best options to run in spades as a target choice for Lightpulsar's ability, if they decide to just be like, you know what, I'm going to take control of your Red Eyes, or 101 your Red Eyes, or banish it. Because there are times that it can be banished. You never know. Next we got the god itself for the deck. 3 Judgment Dragon. You usually would run 2, but I like running 3 because the balance in this deck makes it all the sweeter to run in spades. And considering the fact that a majority of the times I do get this card off more than the rest of the other dragons that I do, yeah, sure it's only $1,000, but you know what? I'm going to be taking a few chunks off of my opponent's chart anyway, and then just summon more JDs on the board, or more dragons on my board, or chaos monsters on my board, and then just go straight for game, unless they magically dropped a hand trap. Enough said. You got game. Next we got 1 Red Eyes to set up the OTK more with Lightpulsar and with JD. And you can't really go wrong with Lightpulsar on the field, especially if you have this in your grave. Enough said. Basic OTK. This, JD, and Lightpulsar, instant win. And, of course, for a secondary target for Eclipse Wyvern and Allure of Darkness fodder, or just summoning it straight to the field because it is easy to get out, 1 Dark Armed. And considering the fact that it can pop any of your opponent's unnecessary cards on the field, it never really hurts to have. And mainly because it's fodder for Chaos Dragons, it's always essential to run Dark Armed as a secondary target, or as another option to weigh on if you want to have something else to go off of, because destruction is always your friend in this deck overall. Next for the dragons, we got 1 Eclipse Wyvern. I was thinking of adding another one, but I wasn't sure what to take out. I may take out a JD and add another one, but for now I'm just going to work with what I have, or just keep the JD and just make it a 41 card deck and just add another one right out of the blue. And for the dragons, one Divine Dragon Apocralyph, because you do tend to mill the dragons that you need to get your OTKs off. You can always have this to recycle them back to your hand, or just get a Red Eyes, and if you have a Lightpulsar, do so, or if you have a Darkflare, do so and just special summon it via from the hand or graveyard, and not waste anything for Lightpulsar's ability from their graveyard straight to the field. But nonetheless, Divine Dragon Apocryph, I'm actually shocked a lot of people aren't running this. You should. Next, for the Chaos Monsters, we've got one BLS and one Chaos Sorcerer. Yes, I would run a play set of these, but considering I wanted to add more space for the Lightsworn Engine, I figured, you know what, I'll just work with what I have. But there are times where I hardly run into this more than BLS, because usually when I get this off, it's lights out. The hand traps, we've got one Gorz, one Honest, and one Trageodia. Self-explanatory. Yes, I cut out the maxes just like I did for the other Chaos Dragon deck, but considering the fact that I hardly run into them, but when they do become useful on a given turn, let me tell you, the synergy with these, it's never a gimmick. Especially with Honest, if I have a Lightpulsar, or if I have a JD, if I decide to be a douche, and just drop it right there, yeah. Most of these hand traps are pretty broken in this deck. Next, we've got the Lightsworn Engine. Just got to move aside the Chaos Engine. We got 3 Lumina, still, self-explanatory. First turn Michael plays are never a problem in this deck. And usually with that setup, yeah, you're pretty much going to be getting a lot of food for your Lightpulsar dragons, or any of your dragons in general. Mainly Lightpulsar. Triple Raiden, self-explanatory. Get the extra 2 mil, and then get the other mil afterwards. It never really hurts. Usually first turn, if I get this, and if I see a Lightpulsar just lying and waiting in my graveyard, I can always think, you know what, I'm getting 4 mils because this guy gives me an extra 2. And considering the fact that it gets a boost up to 1900, it's really awesome in this deck. But mainly for the Michael play, that's why I go for it, if I'm able to get it first turn. Because there are a majority of times you will get it. 2 Lyla. I would run 3, but I wanted to cut it out for like some more stuff for the Lightsworn Engine and add more flexibility for the JD requirements. 1 Minerva. You hardly run into this, but it is pretty good to run into, especially if you want to get the that extra mill off. Like if it's sent straight from the deck to the graveyard or from your hand to the graveyard, it's always in your favor, depending on what you get. 1 Ryko, one of my favorites, and it's used as a bluff, but you hardly, your opponent hardly notices. So, considering the fact that flip effects are not irrelevant, but you hardly see them, never hurts to run into this as a bluff card and then just pop your opponent's stuff, and then just mill 3 right off the bat. 1 Jain, self-explanatory, good for the battle phase, and then just gain 300 afterwards. It can get over Thunder King, just as long as they don't get an Honest on time before you. 1 Garoth for the mill count, and then getting a plus off of each Lightsworn that you milled. It's essential. You never know what you're gonna mill, and considering the fact that it's a good JD target too, never hurts. It's lesser known and it's underrated, even though a lot of people don't run it, but I like it. 1 Erhen, self-explanatory, good for getting rid of Zen mains, getting rid of any defense, or just getting rid of face downs that can really hurt. Downside is, if it were a flip effect monster, it has to activate. So, yeah, it'll go to the deck, but it still activates. So, just be prepared for that. But Erhen never really hurts, considering the fact that it gets like one of the highest mills, along with Lyla, Lumina, and the others that give like a 3+ mil. Celestia. Now this card I was contemplating on, but I figured, you know what, considering that it is pretty useful, especially since it gives the highest mill next to JD out of the bunch, even though JD is not a Lightsworn, it does need the components of getting Lightsworns into your grave to summon it. Yeah, Celestia is pretty broken in this deck, especially considering it's a beater. She can really help you in the long run during the main phase, and then just set you up and then just go straight for the OTK after that. Get a Lightpulsar, get whatever you need, possibly get a Wulf off of that mill, and then just pop their cards and then game. I mean, it's possible. You can run into that from time to time. One Wulf and one Feliz. If you want to have an out to getting Michael first turn, if you don't get Raiden, you always have this. Enough said. And it pops a monster on your opponent's field via face down or face up, so it's never a gimmick. So that's it for the monster lineup. Now onto the spells. We got triple solar recharge, double charge of the Light Brigade. I wish it were at 3, but I mean, hey, with Konami, it may stay semi-limited, but I like where it's going nonetheless. And of course, one Allure of Darkness still. Mainly to get draw power and get more synergy with Lightsworns. It's awesome. Now we're going to start with the synchros because it's small. We're going to start with 2 Michaels. I decided to keep 2, and I almost thought of running 3, but I figured, you know what? Just running the balance of double never really hurts. And considering the fact that you can get one of them back into the deck after you use the other one, it's always essential just to gain those points right off of those Lightsworns that you have in your grave. 2 Black Rose still, because blowing up your opponent's field and yours, it usually doesn't hurt you, but more so your opponent. But when you get that synergy off with Lightpulsar with Black Rose, yeah, it's explosive. I may cut one out for a Scarlight when I get one, but until then, the explosiveness with Black Rose is going to sit in this deck for a while. Next we got 1 Stardust Spark, self-explanatory, to protect your dragons or any of your monsters overall, or any of your face-up cards overall. Doesn't have to be just monsters. Just as long as it's face-up, you can do whatever you want to do with it. And mainly for another Lightpulsar target, and considering the fact that it works well with Lightpulsar's ability, Hot Red Dragon. Never a gimmick, but the downside is this card has to be the only one to attack. And 1 tech of Star Eater. Hardly run into this, but it's pretty broken. Next we got 1 Queen Dragoon, 1/101, 1 Castell, 1 Volcasaurus. It's still the whole Xyz lineup that makes the deck flow. 1 Exa-Beetle, the most highly underrated rank 6/6C in the deck, and considering the fact it's explosive with Lightpulsar, depending on what your opponent has face up, it's broken. 1 Strike Bouncer for burn damage, 1 Ptolemy for the extra recycling power, and just go straight into a Gaia Charger, and of course 1 Gaia Charger to end the monster lineup and put the deck to a close. So, that's it for the deck. Hope you all enjoyed. Please leave a like and favorite if you did. And if you have any suggestions, please leave them. Hit me up in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe. And until then, this is Smash Adams signing out.